Hey up, I'm Nathan Human, and this is episode 11 of the Biscuit Reviews. This episode looks at two novels that feature criminal families and historical grievances. One that is brand new, and one that is actually from a few years ago. Both introduce us to characters that will become a part of a series, and both are crime novels that bring something a little different to the crime thriller genre table. Neil Lancaster's Dead Man's Grave introduces us to Detective Max Craigie and a mysterious death that leads to a sprawling thriller from Glasgow to the Highlands. But first, let's head to the English coast and meet an unlikely duo in W.A. Kelly's debut novel, Safe Hands. And I'm proper chuffed that we have our second guest author on the Biscuit Reviews, as I chatted with Wayne Kelly to discuss the art of safecracking, what you get from older lead characters, and the demands of independent publishing, as well as finding out what a chiz it is.
Yeah, I'm Wayne Kelly. I write as W.A. Kelly, crime writer. My first novel, Safe Hands, came out last year in November, and my audiobook has just been released. As aside from the writing, my day job is in film and video production, and I like to do a bit of music on the side as well. So yeah, lots of creative things, but writing has always been my main passion. I would say I'm a writer first and everything else second.
And could you give us the elevator pitch for Safe Hands?
Yeah, so Safe Hands. So it's a gritty British thriller that's set at the seaside, and it's about an aging safecracker that's drawn out of retirement for one last job to save his dying wife, and also reconnect with a son that hates his guts. He meets a middle-aged single mother called Hazel, who is basically driven to kill to protect her son from being sucked into a life of crime. And it takes place over a few days in Skegness, and it's twisty and there's a bit of dry humour. And it's set in Skeggy, as we call it round here, in Leicestershire.
And Mickey isn't the typical hero character we often get for a starter. He's a little bit older.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a deliberate thing. I did want to write something about somebody that's a bit older because I think there's more stuff to go at there. One of the things I was interested in is exploring the regrets that people get as they're older. And a big thing is about parents and children, their children basically, and this idea that you can't correct your mistakes through your children, which lots of parents, and I'm speaking as a parent as well, I think you do think that. I think you get a child and you think, right, now they're not going to make any of the same mistakes that I made. I'm going to make sure I'll just tell them about it, and then they won't do it. But that's not how life works, as you know. You kind of have to live. You have to live it yourself, and you have to make your own mistakes. So that's one of the things that this book's about. So having an older character that could have that, both talking about their own upbringing, but also the relationship they've got with their kids, that was a big part of it.
As someone myself who is no longer young, I'll phrase it that way, there was an added layer of relatability with the characters of this age and who maybe, can't do the things they used to do. And they also bring a lot more personal history to the story. Yeah,
so that was kind of it was a conscious thing. But I just think when characters that are that old, they kind of make more interesting decisions. They have to think about things a lot more. They can't be like a Jack Reacher character and think, well, I'll just beat a load of people up. And although Mickey's got like some, boxing and stuff in his backstory, he recognizes the fact that physical side of his nature is he can't keep doing that, and that's not something that he can keep coming back to. He's not in a position where he can start fighting blokes that are in their 20s and 30s and things, and he has to accept that and find other ways to do things.
As well as the leads being a little bit older, the other bit that felt old school was a safecracker. That seems like a real throwback. Was there a story behind that choice? Maybe some history, something you already knew?
Well, I love heist things anyway. I always love heist films. I love heist books and all that kind of thing. I think it's kind of exciting. The big thing for me was I had this idea that, he's a safecracker, and in my research doing it, there are some people, and it sounds kind of almost supernatural, but there are people that can do this, they've got a very, very heightened sense of touch. And some old school locksmiths can do the same thing. It's a bit like picking a lock a normal, kind of a door lock or whatever. But it's essentially being able to sort of have a sense of what's going on inside the mechanism, so they can lay their hands on these huge vaults and these safes and things, and by manipulating um, the dial and other different bits and pieces, they can sort of feel when something catches inside, and from that they can work out what the combination of a safe is. And the particular guy that I found was this guy called Jeff Sitar. I'm not convinced that that's his real name, but that's what he says he's called. And he's an American guy, and he won this competition that's held or was held every year called the World Champion Safecracker. And he does have this amazing talent. So I just kind of took that and I ran with it. And in doing so, it gave me something else to go on with the character, which was this idea that he experiences the world with this very, very heightened sense of touch. In lots of ways, Mickey is not sensitive at all, but in this one particular way, he doesn't. It's not. I think when I start the book quite early on, it sort of talks about how smells can transfer you back to another time and place for a lot of people. But for Mickey, it's laying his hands on something, puts his hands on whatever, and he's transported back to thinking about something that happened in his childhood or something from his marriage or whatever it happens to be. But that's the skill that he's got. So that's what I wanted to know. I just thought it was a bit more interesting, to tell you the truth, and it was a bit more literary, and I could do something else with it when he's breaking into a safe, rather than, right, I've set the charge and I'm going to blow the door off.
The setting in good old Skeggy was a real thrill to me as a Chiswick. Was it always on your mind to set a story there? If you don't know what a Chiswick is, it's what the people of Skegness called people from Leicester, due to their habit of going into shops, pointing at things and saying, "How much is it? How much is it? How much is it? How much is it?"
It's funny, a few years ago, because like you, obviously, we're from Leicestershire, so it's kind of the closest sort of well-known beach is Skegness. And I've never been a huge fan of Skegness. Sorry if any Skegness people are listening, but I was never a massive fan of it. Even when we were kids, kind of went with the grandparents occasionally, but my mum and dad we're all like working class and everything, but we'd sooner go to like Cornwall or somewhere like that, drive the extra distance. So I was never a huge fan of it. And then kind of quite a long time ago now, probably might even be sort of 10 years ago, when my daughter was growing up, she was a dancer, and she was in dance competitions, many of which were held at Butlins at Skegness. So you'd be kind of there for like a long weekend. So I had to go there. And I'd got this, even so far back then, I had got this kind of weird story kicking around. And just walking around there, taking a walk up and down the coast and taking pictures and different bits and pieces, I just thought this would be a really good setting. And again, it's one of those things, it kind of links back to Mickey. It's kind of faded, it's past its prime.
We're so going to get complaints from the Skeggy tourists.
I know. But having said that, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they were saying, no, I love it. I went there and it's great. I love the fact that it's like really kitsch and it's really. So my kind of get out with it is, okay, the Skegness doesn't come across brilliantly in the book, but that's because it's been seen through the eyes of a jaded safecracker. It's probably really nice in reality.
Maybe you'll get invited back when the book does well.
Yeah, I thought about going on Skegness Radio, but I don't think they'd appreciate it.
Well, they'll change their mind when it gets made into a TV series. I mean, you've said there's going to be another book, and you've got the ideal character in a safecracker for a series, even if just for punny titles. So just bear with me. Safe as houses, safe and sound. Have you got a list of titles ready?
Yeah, the safe things dropped away for book 2. I've got working title for book 2, and I've also moved away from Skegness. So at the end of, well, without giving too much away, towards the end of the book, there's a hint that something's going to happen. The story's going to move to my home turf, if you like, Leicestershire. So book 2, a lot of book 2 takes place in around this neck of the woods.
I, for one, welcome more stories being set in different cities and towns. I particularly wanted to ask Wayne about how he managed to fit in writing a novel around family and a full-time job, and his own podcast show. I heard he was getting up at 5 a.m. to write.
Yeah, I was, yeah. I can't write at night time, not very often. I've done it when I've really had to do it and I've been up against deadlines and things, but I'm not great at being creative after I've done a whole day's work and all the rest of it. But I'm much better in first thing in the morning. I often wake pretty early anyway with an idea, or I want to get something sorted. But that just seemed the best way to do it. And then when I've done my words, I can crack on with the day and not worry about it so much. And I think I think that's the same for a lot of writers, not necessarily writing in the morning, but having to fit it around other things. I mean, I think before you start writing, or when you're quite early to writing, you've kind of got this idea that you're going to be able to lock yourself away in some garret somewhere and just bash out thousands and thousands of words without being distracted. But it's just very, very rare that happens. Even writers that write full time and get paid to do so, it's still really, really difficult because you've got other stuff going on in your life. So you have to make time to do it. And I think with life in general, I think if you kind of find out the things that you really want to do, because they're the ones that you make time for regardless.
Another thing I'm always fascinated by is the different approaches writers take. Are you a planner, Wayne? Do you go for story and character arc split into acts and key plot points before you start, maybe with big post-it notes on a board? Or are you just more kind of instinctive and write and see where it goes?
I am kind of somewhere between the two. I kind of would say naturally I'm a pantser. I do everything by the seat of my pants. I come up with an idea and I just start writing it. But as I've just found just very recently with this book that I'm working on now, I've written like sort of 50,000 words, and now I can sort of tell that a lot of that stuff that I've written is not going to be in the final book. I already know from where I am because the story's developed, and I can see, okay, no, that's not what needs to be happening, or that's not the best way of doing it. I do have to find my way to a certain extent. I come up with a premise and an idea, and like all of these things, it's a bit like like when you have a dream and you wake up and you think, oh yeah, I know exactly what that dream's about, and then you start trying to tell somebody the dream and it just falls apart. It just like dissolves in front of your eyes. Well, sometimes it's a bit like that with a story. I think you think, oh yeah, I know what the whole thing is. I've got the whole premise. I know where it's going. And then as you start to actually tell it, you realize it doesn't actually quite work and doesn't quite fit together. I've had it before where I'm like, I really want the plot to do this because I've got a bit of a plan and I think it's going to go this way. But then when it comes down to it, Mickey wouldn't do that, or whoever the character is, they just wouldn't do that, or that's not how they'd react, or that's not what they'd do. So you've got to find another way to do it. I like to just write and find the characters, but then at some point you do have to think, right, where am I going and what's the structure? I'm a big believer in structure because I've written screenplays and stuff, and if you do that, then you cannot do that without a structure because it's just a waste of time. Otherwise, you'd just be writing scenes for nothing.
We did carry on with more about this planning versus pantsing approach to writing, but you know what? If you want more of that, it's probably best to head over to Wayne's Conversations with Writers on his The Joined Up Writing podcast. So let's skip ahead to find out how it's been producing your own debut novel and all that this endeavour entails.
It was, it was really good. I started off, I had lots of trepidation initially because I didn't, the big thing that put me off, I wanted to do indie publishing years ago. And I even talked about it on my podcast and sort of told people I was going to do it. And then I sort of chickened out because the big thing was I didn't want to have to learn about promotions and marketing like a lot of artists and writers and whatever. I'm not particularly great at selling myself. Don't particularly like doing that. And that really, really kind of put me off about it. But then a couple of things happened. I've spoken to dozens and dozens and dozens of traditionally published authors, and the reality now, especially in the modern world, is they have to do that anyway. So they're still doing it. You can't sort of get out of doing that. Your publisher still expects you to do a certain amount of promotion yourself. They still expect you to put out your own marketing materials and all these kind of things that you kind of just used to get as part of the package. And it's actually been really good fun learning all this stuff and learning lots of new skills and meeting lots of new people. There's things to think about like book formatting, book layout. There's advanced reader copies to think about and sending it out to people before your book even comes out. So you have to be quite a long way in advance. If you're really serious about it, you need to be thinking about having a proper edit done and a copy edit and a proofread. And there's lots of things that you don't get to do that lots of traditionally published authors get to do. Book tours at Waterstones and all the rest of it. You can do some of those things and you can try and influence people and do it, but there's lots of things you just don't get because you're paying for it yourself and you're kind of on the outside. So it's been a challenge, and I'm still learning, and I'm going to be learning for the next God knows how many years doing it. But it's been great having the control and the ability to drive things where I want to go. And the other thing with it is the time scale of it. If I got traditionally published today, and that's, by the way, that's not something that I'm ruling out for other projects and other books. It's not like I'm fiercely independent and now that's that. I am still interested in traditional publishing.
Yeah, just in case any publishers are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I will be querying my next book with an agent. But if I was traditionally published today, the reality is, in most instances, my book would not appear for probably 18 months to 2 years from now. That's if I got signed today, right now. And lots of people don't realise that.
Okay, we've also mentioned the possibility of a TV show a couple of times. So have you let yourself get carried away with some fantasy casting yet?
No. Somebody did do a tweet recently and they said who would play your main female protagonist, and I did pick out Tandy Newton for Hazel.
Right, so we just need to get a copy into the hands of Thandie Newton, or maybe Thandie Newton's agent. And where can people, especially Thandie Newton, get a copy of Safe Hands to read with their eyes or now listen to with their ears?
The audiobook's just come out and that's on Audible. And if you go to my website, which is waynekellywrites.com, you'll be able to find links to everything on there anyway, my books and everything else. But I've also been sharing a link. You can get 30 days free Audible trial, and you can then listen to the book for free if you use your credit to do that. So you can check that out on there. You can get the book on, again, I'm doing signed copies from my website, but also you can get it on Amazon and you can order it into your local bookshop and stuff as well. So yeah, anywhere you can find books, really.
And how about the podcast Joined Up Writing?
So my podcast is the Joined Up Writing podcast, and that's been going since 2014. And basically every episode I interview a different writer. It's usually an author, but I've done screenwriters, I've done agents and things as well. But they're usually authors about their latest book that's come out, their writing journey, their hints, their tips, their creative inspiration for other people. And also we talk about the book that saved their life. So yeah, and that comes out every couple of weeks, and there's hundreds of episodes to go out at joinedupwriting.co.uk or on all your normal podcaster type places.
If you are interested in authors or the writing process, I can totally recommend having a listen. From the episodes I've heard, you will definitely get some invaluable tips and insights. Thanks so much for chatting, Wayne. Really good to catch up with you and hear about the book. Good luck with Safe Hands and with writing the follow-up.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. Really appreciate it.
I heartily recommend getting yourself a copy of Safe Hands, whether a physical copy, digital ebook or listening on Audible, as it is an absolute treat, especially if you are a fan of crime thrillers, even more so if you're craving a British crime thriller, and absolutely if you want a British crime thriller with older lead characters that's set in Skegness. All right, bit niche that last bit, but still. Actually, I'm not joking about the setting being a plus point of the novel. I really enjoy a book that can vividly build a world, and for me, that's just as important with a local crime drama as it is with a sci-fi or fantasy novel. It also helps a novel feel different right from the start due to the simple fact that it's not set in one of the usual big cities. Mickey Blake is an intriguing main character, and his past as a boxer and a safecracker combined with a complex family situation to give depth to the one last job setup. With a sick wife at home in their Spanish retreat, Mickey is dragged back to England to settle a debt via a dubious-sounding casino job. But something is definitely fishier than the local chippy, and Mickey seems right to not trust anyone as he embarks on his own investigation before he's the next to be battered.
Oh my God!
Yeah, okay, sorry, that was bad. The usual detective and junior partner duo is given a twist here as Mickey crosses paths with Hazel, a single mum with a score of her own to settle. Both of them are blunt, fiercely protective of their families, and it's fun to see them spar and circle each other in a refreshing change to the usual romantic leads. Like the tide retreating to reveal what lies beneath, Kelly skillfully lets the characters divulge their murky pasts and true motivations as we build towards the conclusion of both stories. It hits the spot as a page-turning thriller, but it is also immensely satisfying as it pieces together the clues and the tension is lifted with some wry, dry and deft humour. This book is a bit of a throwback, in a good way, in that the big set pieces are more analogue than high-tech, And the characters remind me more of the type you'd bump into at your local pub buying their scampi fries, rather than in a rustic bar drinking a cocktail out of a jam jar. And you know what? A crime series set around the East Midlands sounds like a winner to me. Chip Cobbs all round. And with the author working on the sequel now, fingers crossed we might get to see Mickey Blake curse his way across our screens. There was really only one direction I could go in for a biscuit to rate this book with local connections. With a biscuit factory down the road making McVitie's, I've had to go with a club biscuit. Locally made, comforting, a bit of a throwback, and thoroughly satisfying. And with a sequel on the way, instead of saying,
if you like a lot of chocolate on your biscuit, join our club.
We can say, like a lot of great writing, interesting characters, and a pacey thriller, join our Mickey Blake Club. You can win your very own signed copy of Safe Hands by simply going to social media and following and liking and or sharing our posts about this episode. You can find the links at thebiscuitreviews.co.uk or just search Humanishi. That's human with I-S-H-Y at the end on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Or, if you already follow me, just, retweet my stuff or whatever. The second book this episode is actually an older book and one I read last year but didn't get time to review. But it pairs thematically so well with Safe Hands that this is the ideal spot to indulge in another crime thriller. Dead Man's Grave by Neil Lancaster is also the first in a British crime series. It also features a protagonist dealing with a family situation out on his own and centres around both present and past crimes of a notorious crime family. But from those basic templates, we veer off in two different directions. Starting with a mysterious and almost folksy horror scene in a remote Scottish graveyard, Dead Man's Grave pitches relocated Met detective Max Craigie into a centuries-old feud and institutional corruption in a thriller that races across Scotland. The opening in the graveyard is a nice hook, and the story is set up sharply, and little time is wasted in pairing Detective Max Craigie with rookie Janie Coldy. Both of them are wary outsiders, with Craigie transferred from the Met whilst he faces an inquiry about a shooting, and Calder is highly rated and on for fast-track promotion despite the less than favourable attitudes of her colleagues. This sets it up for some spiky encounters and sharp dialogue. The two are packed off to investigate the disappearance of the head of Scotland's most powerful crime family. But why these two? Because there's a worry that this crime family may have infiltrated the police. Once we have the basic details, we are off and herring across the country with a gripping setup of criminals and maybe police, following Max and Janie as they try to stay a step ahead in solving mysteries old and new. Turning to crime writing after serving in the police or armed forces seems to be such a popular career path that I'm surprised they're not using it as a recruiting tool.
Want to fight crime and become a published author? Sign up to join the police today.
The extra spin that Lancaster brings is that not only was he in the armed forces and the police, but he was a covert police specialist. He bequeaths super surveillance skills to his detective, and it adds an extra layer of excitement and joy to the proceedings. It also provides another way for the case to develop, and these skills are put to the test when it is made clear to Detective Craigie that he may well be fighting this battle without the full support of law enforcement. Fortunately, young Calder is on his side, and she proves to be a more than capable partner and a more rounded, interesting supporting character than some lesser crime books provide. As well as the authenticity and extra detail that Lancaster brings to the case and the characters, he also spins a speedy yarn that has some fine action and some subplots and additional characters that are developed with relish and hint at what might be to come in future books. Not only does this book get a thumbs up from me, but I also lent it to my brother when he was back from his travels, and he promptly read it in a couple of days and ordered the next two and flew through them too. I'm now keen to catch up. My biscuit rating for Dead Man's Grave? A ginger cream crunch. Solid, dependable, and with a little kick of extra flavour and enjoyable filling that makes you glad there's another one to start on. You can find all past episodes and written reviews at thebiscuitreviews.co.uk. If you can spare a minute to leave a review and rate the podcast wherever you listen, that would be massively appreciated. And perhaps there's someone you could tell about the show. They'll think you're super cool for recommending them a podcast. Honest. Thanks for listening. I'm off for a brew and a bicky. Until next time, ta-ra.